The air in the Lumina conclave was not air at all, but a shimmering, pressurized medium of inert gases and suspended motes of light that hummed with the silent weight of governance. It tasted of ozone and ancient stone. High Executor Thrax stood upon the central dais, his ceremonial armor of polished obsidian reflecting the swirling, nebulae projected onto the vaulted ceiling above. The chamber was a perfect sphere carved from the heart of a moonlet, its walls a living crystal that pulsed with the slow, rhythmic life of the Glip Dominion. Below him, arranged in concentric circles of floating platforms, sat the arbiters and loremasters, their faces impassive masks of tradition and rigid intellect. For cycles they had debated, their voices resonating with the cold, precise cadence of their language, a language built on logic and mathematical certainty. But today, a tremor of something profoundly illogical had entered their discourse: fear. The subject of this fear was a faint, insignificant star system designated Sol, and the primitive, bipedal organisms that had recently crawled from its third planet's atmospheric cradle. Humanity. The name itself was a soft, fleshy sound, lacking the crystalline sharpness of Glipt phonetics. For millennia, they had been a footnote in a forgotten stellar survey, a presentient species of interest only to the most esoteric of xenobiologists, catalogued and dismissed. Yet now they were a crisis. The central holographic display, a column of pure light that descended from the chamber's apex, showed the source of their consternation. It was a starship, but it was not a human starship. It was Glipt. Or it had been. "It is a desecration." Arbiter Kalen's voice cut through the solemn silence, his words sharp as flaked obsidian. His platform drifted forward, a subtle act of aggression. "A relic of our own making, a testament to a minor, acceptable failure, has been contaminated. These creatures, these humans, have taken the Cathar and twisted it into an effigy of their own primitive understanding." The Cathar? The name meant flawed shard in the old tongue. Thrax remembered the vessel, though the memory was distant, buried under ages of galactic administration. It had been an experimental long-range scout, a beautiful thing of flowing lines and seamless hull plating, powered by a prototype resonance core. The core was its triumph and its undoing. It was designed to fold space by harmonizing with the universe's underlying quantum foam, a theoretical marvel. But the prototype was unstable. It produced a dissonant frequency, a persistent, untraceable vibration that defied every diagnostic, every recalibration. It was an imperfection in an otherwise perfect machine. And in the Glip Dominion, imperfection was a form of sacrilege. Perfection was not an aspiration. It was the fundamental law of their existence, the principle upon which their technology, their society, their very philosophy was built. A thing was either perfect in its function, or it was nothing. The Cathar was nothing. And so it had been abandoned. Following protocol, its memory banks were wiped of all strategic data, its navigation systems locked, and it was scuttled on a world deemed barren of intelligent life, a silent monument to a failed theory. The system, Sol, was placed under a low-priority observational quarantine, the kind reserved for nascent biospheres that might one day, in some far-flung future, warrant a second look. That had been an error, a colossal, unprecedented error in judgment. Loremaster Vela, her robes the deep violet of ancient nebulae, glided her platform into a counterposition. Her voice was softer, but it carried a different kind of weight, the weight of accumulated knowledge. Desecration, arbiter, or adaptation? The data is unequivocal. The humans did not simply occupy the vessel. They have integrated with it. Their primitive chemical combustion engines are fused to its auxiliary power conduits. Their crude computational devices are networked, somehow, into our crystalline data matrices. They have bypassed systems we ourselves deemed irreparable. They have hammered scrap metal onto a work of art, Kalen countered, his tone dripping with contempt. They are children playing with a weapon they cannot comprehend. The dissonant frequency of the core alone should have driven their organic minds to madness. That it has not is an anomaly that warrants extreme caution. We must consider sanitization. The potential for a contaminated technology to spread is a threat to the Dominion's integrity. The word sanitization hung in the luminous air, cold and absolute. It was the Glip term for systemic eradication, a tool used rarely but with chilling efficiency. Thrax felt a weariness settle deep within his being. For so long, the universe had operated according to their principles. The Glip did not conquer, they corrected. They did not destroy, they pruned. They brought order to the chaotic symphony of the cosmos, ensuring that every note played was in its proper key. But humanity was a dissonant chord, one played on an instrument of their own creation. "The Loremaster is correct," Thrax's voice filled the chamber, imbued with the authority of his office. The humming of the chamber deepened in response. This is not a simple case of technological contamination. We abandoned the Cathar because we could not silence the imperfection in its heart. We saw a flaw. These humans, it seems, saw something else. A tool, perhaps? A puzzle? Their progress since reactivating the vessel has been exponential. He gestured and the holographic display shifted. It showed a timeline, a stark vertical line of glip technological evolution, smooth and gradual over hundreds of thousands of years. Beside it, a second line appeared for humanity. For most of its length, it was a flat, unremarkable crawl. Then, at the very end, it spiked, an almost vertical ascent that was as terrifying as it was unbelievable. In less than one of their own centuries, they had gone from splitting atoms to reactivating a glipped resonance core. They have learned from the flawed shard, Vela added, her gaze fixed on the alarming graph. They have reverse-engineered rudimentary gravitic plating from the hull. They have deciphered basic elements of our language from residual data fragments we failed to erase. They are not merely using the ship. They are learning its soul, interpreting it through the lens of their own chaotic, aggressive evolution. And that is precisely the danger. Kalen's platform pulsed with a faint red light of agitation. Their evolution is chaotic. Their history is a litany of self-inflicted violence. To grant such a species access to technologies they are not philosophically prepared for is to invite catastrophe. What happens when they learn to replicate the resonance drive? What happens when they turn that puzzle into a weapon? We have a duty, High Executor, to preserve the stability we have so carefully cultivated across the galactic arms. Thrax turned his gaze from the hologram to the faces of his council. He saw the logic in Kalen's argument. It was the safe path, the traditional path, the glipped way. Isolate the anomaly, study it from a distance, and if necessary, excise it before it can metastasize. But something held him back. It was the core of the problem itself, the imperfection, the dissonance. They had run from it, discarded it. The humans had embraced it. What did that say about them? What did it say about the Glip's own rigid philosophy? Had their pursuit of perfection created a blind spot, an inability to see potential in the flawed? He felt a deep philosophical tremor, a crack in the crystalline certainty of his worldview. The universe was not a perfect equation to be solved. It was a dynamic, evolving entity filled with variables and beautiful, terrifying imperfections. Perhaps, for the first time in millennia, the Glipt had encountered a variable they could not account for. "We will not sanitize the system," Thrax declared, his decision settling like a shroud over the conclave. A ripple of surprise, visible as a subtle wave of light across the platforms, passed through the arbiters. Kalen's posture stiffened. "Nor will we ignore it. We will do what we should have done from the beginning. We will investigate, directly." "High Executor, that is an unacceptable risk," Kalen protested. "Direct contact with a Tier 0 civilization that has salvaged our technology is a violation of 1,000 cycles of protocol." "Protocols are built on precedent," Thrax replied, his voice unyielding. "We have no precedent for this. A fleet will be dispatched. Not a war fleet, Arbiter," he added, glancing at Kalen, "but an expeditionary force. A diplomatic and scientific convoy. We will approach this Sol system and we will confront this anomaly. We will meet these humans." He paused, letting the weight of his command fill the chamber. The projected nebula above seemed to swirl with a new, uncertain energy. "We will see for ourselves what kind of beings can take our most profound failure and call it their greatest achievement. We must understand the nature of a mind that does not fear imperfection, but builds its future upon it." The journey to the Sol system was a silent, stately procession through the void. A flotilla of glipped vessels, their hulls like polished obsidian teardrops, moved without a ripple in spacetime, propelled by perfected resonance drives that sang a harmonious, silent song. Thrax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Vigilance, a vessel that represented the pinnacle of glipped engineering. Its interior was a seamless fusion of crystal, light, and quiescent technology, a cathedral dedicated to order. He watched the star charts resolve, the insignificant yellow star of the human system growing from a point of light to a discernible disk. He had spent the transit cycle in deep contemplation, studying every fragment of data Loremaster Vela could retrieve about humanity. It was a contradictory and deeply unsettling record. He saw their capacity for breathtaking art, for profound empathy, for selfless sacrifice. And in the very next data stream, he saw their history of tribal warfare, of genocide, of ecological self-destruction. They were a species of profound dualities, a chaotic blend of creation and destruction that defied easy categorization. They were, in a word, imperfect. And yet they were undeniably successful, a tenacious form of life that had clawed its way to dominance on its world. Beside him, Arbiter Kalen maintained a stoic silence, his disapproval a palpable presence on the bridge. He had not argued further, but his compliance was rigid, a formal adherence to the chain of command that did not mask his profound disagreement. He saw this mission as a fool's errand, an indulgence of the High Executor's sudden, inexplicable fascination with a galactic aberration. Vela, however, was a quiet whirlwind of activity, her station surrounded by shimmering holographic displays as she cross-referenced human transmissions with the Cathar's last known linguistic archives. "They are aware of our approach, High Executor," a bridge officer announced, his voice calm and precise. "They have been tracking us since we entered their outer system. Their sensor technology is surprisingly effective, a crude fusion of microwave detection and some form of gravitic resonance imaging derived, we believe, from the Cathar's landing gear." "They make no move to flee or to attack?" Thrax asked, his gaze fixed on the view screen, which now showed the distant glimmer of planets orbiting their star. "Neither. They are holding their position. The vessel, the modified Cathar, is in high orbit over their third planet. It is waiting." Thrax felt a strange sense of anticipation, a feeling he had not experienced since his youth. It was the thrill of the unknown, a concept the Glypt had long since engineered out of their existence. Their maps were complete, their science was comprehensive, their future was a predictable trajectory of sustained order. And now, a single, discarded ship had introduced the element of pure, terrifying uncertainty back into their lives. As the Glypt fleet decelerated, resolving into a precise geometric formation at the edge of the system's primary asteroid belt, the human vessel came into clear view. The long-range sensors fed the image to the main screen, and a collective, silent gasp seemed to pass through the bridge crew. It was the Cathar, but it was also not. The elegant, flowing lines of the Glypt scout were still visible, a skeletal framework of its original design. But it was draped in new structures, new materials that were jarringly alien to the Glypt aesthetic. Where there had once been seamless hull plating, there were now panels of a darker, matte-finished metal, bolted and welded into place with a brutal functionality that eschewed all elegance. Additional modules, blocky and utilitarian, clung to its dorsal spine. A complex and chaotic-looking array of antennae and sensor dishes bristled from its command section, a stark contrast to the Glypt's integrated, invisible sensor systems. It was as if a master sculptor's marble statue had been repaired with iron girders and concrete. Kalen made a soft noise of disgust. "An insult. They have scarred it." But Thrax saw something else. He saw strength. He saw resilience. The human additions were not elegant, but they were purposeful. They spoke of a species that valued function over form, a species that would use any tool at its disposal to achieve its goal. They had not tried to mimic the Glypt's art. They had imposed their own will upon it, forging a hybrid of two vastly different philosophies. "It is more than we left behind," Vela murmured, her eyes wide with academic fervor. "The energy signature, it is stable. High Executor, the core's dissonant frequency, it is still present. I can read its chaotic resonance even from this distance. But it is contained, shielded somehow." Before Thrax could respond, a new message appeared on the communications console. It was not a hail, not a warning. It was a simple, elegant stream of data, a mathematical proof. It was the prime number theorem articulated in a flawless, universal language of pure mathematics. It was a greeting that said, "We are sentient. We are capable of abstract thought. We are ready to talk." "They are inviting communication," the officer stated, a note of surprise in his voice. "They have decrypted our basic communication protocols from the ship's logs. They are hailing us on a secure Glypt frequency." Thrax took a slow, deliberate breath, the pressurized medium of the bridge feeling suddenly thin. This was the moment of truth, the moment when millennia of certainty would meet a few short centuries of chaotic, unpredictable growth. He thought of the flaw, the imperfection at the heart of the ship, the small, insignificant vibration that his entire civilization had deemed worthless. And he thought of the primitives who had built a nest around that flaw, who had listened to its chaotic song, and instead of trying to silence it, had somehow learned to sing along. "Open a channel," High Executor Thrax commanded, his voice echoing in the sudden, profound silence of the bridge. "Let us hear what they have to say." The face that appeared on the main holographic display was not what Thrax had expected. Filtered through millennia of xenobiological theory and speculative fiction, He had envisioned a creature of raw, primal aggression or perhaps cowering fear. Instead, the human female who materialized before him projected an aura of profound, unshakable calm. Her features were soft and asymmetrical, yet her eyes, a deep, complex blue, held an intelligence that was sharp and direct. She was flanked by two others, one male, one female, all clad in simple, dark blue uniforms that bore a patch depicting their planet and its moon. They stood on a bridge that was a chaotic tapestry of glowing screens, exposed conduits, and worn metal, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of the Vigilance. "I am Ambassador Evelyn Reed of the United Nations of Earth," she said. Her voice, translated by the glipped computers from a language of flowing, liquid sounds, was even and measured. There was no tremor of fear, no hint of arrogance. It was the voice of a professional, an equal meeting an equal. "On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to our home system. We have been expecting you." The quiet confidence of her statement sent a subtle ripple through the glipped bridge crew. Expecting us? Thrax's mind raced. Had they interpreted the Cathar's log so completely? Did they understand who their benefactors, their careless, dismissive benefactors, were? "I am High Executor Thrax of the Glipped Dominion," he replied, his own voice resonating with the practiced authority of his station. "Your vessel, you call it the Cathar." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of Ambassador Reed's lips. "We found no name in the logs we could recover. We call her the Odyssey, for the journey she has brought us on." "A journey into technologies you were not meant to possess," Arbiter Kalen interjected, his voice a blade of ice. Thrax shot him a warning glance, but the damage was done. The diplomatic niceties were shattered. Reed's gaze shifted to Kalen, her expression unchanging. The calm in her eyes was not passive, it was deep, like the surface of a pressurized ocean. "We found a tool abandoned in our celestial backyard, Arbiter. A gift we chose to believe. We have treated it with the respect and curiosity it deserved. We did not steal it. It was discarded." The word discarded struck Thrax with the force of a physical blow. It was the unvarnished truth, stripped of all glipped euphemism and protocol. They had thrown it away. The humans had found it and cherished it. "The vessel was abandoned because it was flawed," Thrax stated, steering the conversation back to the central issue. "Its resonance core is unstable. It produces a chaotic frequency that our finest minds could neither explain nor eliminate. By all our calculations, prolonged exposure to that dissonance should be detrimental to complex organic life." "Ah, the dissonance," Ambassador Reed said, a new layer of understanding dawning in her voice. "You mean the music." Silence, a profound, uncomprehending silence, descended on the bridge of the Vigilance. Thrax stared at the human's hologram, certain that the translator had malfunctioned. "Music. That is what our scientists and artists began to call it," she explained, her tone patient, as if explaining a self-evident truth to a child. "The core doesn't just vibrate, it resonates in complex, non-repeating patterns. It is not noise, it is information, immensely complex information. When we first powered it up, yes, it was disorienting. Some of our crew experienced vertigo, headaches, vivid dreams. We did not see this as a flaw. We saw it as a language we did not yet understand." Thrax felt the very foundations of his reality begin to shift. For 1,000 years, the brightest minds of the Glipped Dominion had approached the problem with cold, hard logic, with oscilloscopes and frequency dampeners. They had tried to force the core into submission, to make it conform to their definition of perfection. "Your people tried to silence it, didn't you?" Reed continued, her insight startlingly acute. "You saw an error in the equation and tried to erase it. We saw a new kind of equation. We did not try to silence the music. We built an instrument to play along with it." She gestured to someone off-screen. The view on the main display shifted, zooming in on the exterior of the Odyssey. It focused on one of the new, blocky modules that the Glipped had found so offensive. Panels slid away to reveal a device of stunning complexity. It was a latticework of crystalline structures, some clearly of human manufacture, others carefully salvaged from the Cathar's non-essential systems, surrounding a pulsating magnetic containment field. "We call it the harmonic resonator," Reed explained. "It doesn't dampen the core's frequency. It listens. It analyzes the patterns and generates a corresponding counter-frequency, not to cancel it out, but to harmonize with it. We turn the dissonance into a duet." Loremaster Vela was leaning forward, her eyes wide, her hands flying across her console as she analyzed the sensor readings pouring in from the human ship. "High Executor, it's true," she breathed, her voice filled with a reverence Thrax had never heard from her. The chaotic energy is still there, but it is being channeled, woven into a stable, coherent energy field. The power output, it's orders of magnitude greater than the core's original design specifications. It is perfect. The word spoken in this context was a profound irony. They had achieved perfection not by eliminating the flaw, but by embracing it, by building a system around it, by turning a problem into a solution. It was a philosophical leap so alien to the Glypt mindset that it bordered on the mystical. "You have accomplished the impossible," Thrax said, his voice a low whisper of awe. "We simply didn't know it was impossible," Ambassador Reed replied, the faint smile returning. "Our history has taught us that survival is often a matter of adaptation, of finding utility in the unexpected. We are a species of tinkers and problem solvers, high executor. We work with the materials we have, not the materials we wish we had. The Odyssey was the greatest gift we could have ever imagined, not because it was perfect, but precisely because it wasn't. It challenged us. It forced us to think outside our limitations." Kalen stood rigid, his face a mask of disbelief. "You speak of this desecration as if it were a triumph. You have no idea of the forces you are tampering with." "On the contrary, Arbiter," Reed's voice took on a new, serious gravity. "We believe we are the only ones who are beginning to understand. The core's music. It allowed us to do more than just power our ship." With a quiet command, she signaled her crew. The Odyssey, the scarred and beautiful fusion of two cultures, began to move. It did not ignite thrusters. It did not engage a gravitic drive. For a fraction of a second, the ship seemed to shimmer, to dissolve into a cascade of fractal light. And then it was gone. The Glypt bridge crew reacted with disciplined alarm, their sensors sweeping the empty space where the human vessel had been. "Where did it go?" Kalen demanded. "Did their unstable core finally overload?" "No," Vela whispered, pointing a trembling finger at a different part of the view screen. The Odyssey had reappeared. It was now positioned on the far side of the Glypt fleet, a maneuver that should have taken minutes at its fastest conventional speed. It had taken less than a second. It had not traveled through space, it had stepped. "A spatial fold," Thrax breathed. "A localized, instantaneous translocation. Our theorists have hypothesized such a feat, but deemed it impossible without an energy source of infinite stability." "The core is not stable," Reed's voice emanated from their comm system, the Odyssey now broadcasting from its new position. "It is chaotic, and it appears the fabric of spacetime responds to controlled, harmonic chaos in ways your stable drives cannot. The flaw, High Executor, was not a flaw. It was the key." Thrax looked from the impossible ship to the calm, steady face of the human ambassador. In that moment, he saw the future of the galaxy, and it was nothing like the orderly, predictable future the Glypt had always envisioned. He saw the vast, empty spaces in their philosophy, the arrogance of their certainty, the weakness inherent in their pursuit of a sterile perfection. They had discarded a key that could unlock the universe, simply because they had not liked the way it was shaped. He thought of the name the humans had chosen, Odyssey. It was not just a ship, it was a statement of intent. It was the beginning of a journey, not just for humanity, but for the Glypt as well. A journey away from the rigid confines of their own dogma. "Ambassador Reed," Thrax said, his voice resonating with a newfound humility and a dawning, terrifying excitement. "I believe the Glypt Dominion has much to learn from you." The dialogue that followed was unlike any negotiation in the long history of the Glypt Dominion. It was not a matter of territory or resources, of threats and counter-threats. It was a profound and unsettling exchange of philosophies. Thrax, over the strenuous but ultimately futile objections of Arbiter Kalen and the traditionalist faction, invited Ambassador Reed and a small human delegation to board the Vigilance. The meeting took place not in a formal chamber, but in the High Executor's personal meditation sphere, a room where the walls were a slow-motion cascade of captured light from a dying star, designed to promote calm and clarity of thought. The humans moved through the perfect, silent corridors of the Glypt flagship with a quiet curiosity that was devoid of either intimidation or avarice. They looked at the seamless crystalline walls and the integrated light conduits not as inferiors gazing upon the works of gods, but as engineers studying a different, highly specialized design methodology. Their questions, relayed through translators, were insightful and direct. They asked not about weapon yields or fleet strength, but about material science, energy efficiency, and the philosophical principles that guided Glypt ship construction. In the meditation sphere, surrounded by the gentle light of a forgotten sun, the true conversation began. Thrax and Vela sat opposite Reed and her chief science officer, a man named Dr. Aris Thorne, whose eyes seemed to sparkle with a restless, analytical energy. "Your civilization has achieved a state of equilibrium," Thorne observed, his gaze sweeping across the serene environment. "Your technology is mature, stable, and self-sustaining. It is designed to minimize risk, to eliminate variables. It is, from an engineering perspective, a masterpiece of reliability." "Reliability is the foundation of order," Thrax replied. "Without it, the galaxy would descend into the chaos from which it was born." "But chaos is also the crucible of creation," Reed countered gently. "Our own world, Earth, is a testament to that. It is a geologically violent, ecologically ferocious place. Life did not arise there in quiet, stable pools, but in roiling, chemical-rich vents and under the bombardment of stellar radiation. We are descended from the survivors of cataclysms. Our strength, such as it is, comes not from avoiding instability, but from enduring it and adapting to it." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "When we found the Odyssey, the Cathar, we recognized that instability. The vibration in its core felt familiar. It felt like the tremor of an earthquake, the unpredictable fury of a storm, the chaotic division of a living cell. It felt like life. To us, your flaw was the ship's heartbeat." Vela, who had been listening with rapt attention, finally spoke. "Our histories teach that life requires stability. That civilization is the process of building walls against the chaos of the universe. You are suggesting that you build your walls with the chaos itself." "We build with what we have," Thorne said with a shrug. "We learned to make fire from the friction of wood. We learned to make tools from the stones that littered our world. We learned to harness the power of the atom, the most chaotic force we had ever known. We are a species defined by our relationship with tools, and the Odyssey is the greatest tool we have ever found. The harmonic resonator was not a stroke of genius, not really. It was an act of desperation and necessity, the same process that led our ancestors to invent the spear, the wheel, and the circuit board." Thrax contemplated this. The Glyph did not invent out of desperation. They designed out of a desire for theoretical elegance. Their technology evolved in pristine laboratories and flawless simulations, emerging fully formed and perfect. The human approach was messy, iterative, born of trial and brutal error. It was inefficient, and yet it had solved a problem that had stumped the Glyph for centuries. "Tell me more of this. Music," Thrax requested, his gaze fixed on Reed. "You said it was more than just a power source. You said it was information." Reed and Thorne exchanged a look, a silent communication that spoke of a shared, heavy burden. It was clear this was the true purpose of their calm, measured diplomacy. The ship, the drive, the impossible leap in technology, it was all secondary to what they had discovered. "When we first achieved stable harmony with the core," Thorne began, his voice lowering, "we expected the energy field to become quiet, predictable. It did not. The harmony amplified the signal, it clarified it. The patterns became clearer, more structured. We were no longer just hearing a chaotic vibration, we were listening to a broadcast." He gestured, and a small device on his wrist projected a holographic image into the space between them. It was not a chart or a graph. It was a waveform of staggering complexity, a three-dimensional evolving sculpture of sound and light. It was beautiful and terrifying in its intricate, alien structure. "This is a small fragment of the signal," Reed said softly. "It is embedded in the very fabric of spacetime. It is everywhere in every direction. But it is so faint, so deeply woven into the background radiation of the cosmos, that it is functionally undetectable. Your own ships, with their perfectly stable, harmonious drives, would be deaf to it. They are designed to filter out exactly this kind of cosmic noise." "But the Odyssey's flawed core," Thrax finished, the realization dawning with the cold weight of a dying star, "is naturally attuned to it. It resonates with it." "Precisely," Thorne confirmed. "Our harmonic resonator acts like an antenna and an amplifier. We are not just powering our ship with the core's energy. We are using that energy to listen to the universe, and the universe is sending a warning." The atmosphere in the sphere grew heavy, the gentle light of the captured sun seeming to dim. Kalen, who had been observing from the edge of the sphere, took an involuntary step forward, his skepticism momentarily forgotten in the face of the human's solemn certainty. "A warning," Vela whispered. "From whom?" "We don't know," Reed admitted. "The signal is ancient, impossibly ancient. Our estimates place its origin point billions of years before our sun was even formed. It is not a message from a civilization in the conventional sense. It is more like an echo, a scar left on reality, a monument of information. Thrax studied the alien waveform, his mind, conditioned to see patterns and order, struggling to grasp its implications. It was structured, yes, but it was a structure born of a logic so far beyond his own that he could barely begin to comprehend it. "What does the warning say?" he asked, his voice quiet. It was Reed who answered, her blue eyes seeming to hold the sorrow of ages. "It doesn't use words. It uses mathematics, astrophysics, and biological decay rates. It is a history and a prophecy encoded in the universal constants. It tells a story, the same story, repeated over and over again through galactic eons. It shows the rise of civilizations, countless civilizations, of every conceivable biology and technological path, reaching a certain level of interstellar capability. And then it shows them vanishing." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "They do not die out in wars, they do not succumb to natural disasters, they simply cease. Their radio signals stop, their energy signatures fade, their worlds go dark. One by one they are erased from the cosmic ledger. The signal shows this happening again and again and again. A recurring, predictable pattern of extinction on a galactic scale." "The Great Filter," Vela breathed, the name a concept from the most esoteric of glyped philosophical texts. A theoretical barrier that prevented civilizations from achieving a truly galactic presence. They had always assumed they were the first to have passed it. "The signal calls it something else," Thorne said, his fingers manipulating the holographic waveform. He isolated a specific recurring pulse within the complex data stream. "The translation is imperfect. It is more of a concept than a word. The silent hunger, the shadow that falls between stars, it speaks of a force or an entity or a natural law that acts as a harvester. It culls civilizations once they become visible on a galactic scale. The signal itself appears to be a final, desperate act of one of these long-dead civilizations. A message in a bottle thrown into the ocean of spacetime, hoping someone, someday, might have the means to receive it." Thrax felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the temperature of the ship. For all their power, for all their knowledge and order, the Glypt had been blind and deaf. They had been gliding through a universe they thought they understood, while a cosmic predator had been patiently waiting in the dark. Their perfection had been their shield, but it had also been their blindfold. "And the Odyssey," he said, the pieces locking into place with dreadful clarity, "is the only instrument in this galaxy, perhaps, that can hear this warning." "It is," Reed confirmed. "That is why we were waiting for you, High Executor. We are a young species. We have one ship cobbled together from your refuse. We have the knowledge, the warning, but we do not have the strength to face this alone. You have the strength, but you lack the knowledge. We were two halves of a solution, separated by an accident of history and a difference in philosophy." The full weight of the situation descended upon Thrax. This was no longer about a salvaged ship or a primitive species. It was about the survival of all life in the galaxy. Humanity's discovery had not just been a technological leap. It had been a revelation that redefined the very nature of their existence. The discarded, flawed shard, the worthless piece of junk left to rot on a forgotten world, had become the single most important object in the known universe. It was the ear that had heard the universe scream. He looked at the humans, at their calm, serious faces, and he saw not primitives but partners. They had faced the terrifying truth of the cosmos not with despair, but with a quiet, determined resolve. They had sought out the architects of their miracle ship not to beg for help, but to offer an alliance. An alliance of the flawed and the perfect, of the adaptable and the orderly, of the children of chaos and the masters of stability. "You have given us a terrible gift, Ambassador Reed," Thrax said, his voice heavy with the gravity of the moment. "It is simply the truth, High Executor," she replied. "What we do with it we must decide together." The Lumina conclave was convened again, but this time the atmosphere was different. The calm certainty was gone, replaced by a tense electric silence that vibrated with the aftershocks of revelation. In the center of the chamber, beside the holographic display of the Glypt Dominion, now stood two new figures, Ambassador Evelyn Reed and Dr. Aris Thorne. Their presence alone was a shattering of millennia of tradition. No alien, certainly no primitive, had ever been granted entry into the conclave's sanctum. High Executor Thrax stood before his people, but he spoke not as a ruler issuing a decree, but as a leader sharing a terrible and necessary truth. He recounted everything, the nature of the Odyssey's drive, the human philosophy of embracing imperfection, and the chilling, final revelation of the ancient signal. He ordered the recording from the meditation sphere to be played, the complex, terrifying waveform of the cosmic warning filling the vast chamber. The silent, stoic masks of the arbiters and loremasters began to crack. He could see flickers of disbelief, of dawning horror, of profound, philosophical vertigo in their eyes. "We have lived under the illusion of our own perfection," Thrax concluded, his voice echoing in the hallowed space. "We believed our mastery over the laws of physics was absolute. We were wrong. Our pursuit of sterile stability blinded us, made us deaf to the true nature of the universe. We mistook a warning for noise. We dismissed a key as a flaw. A younger, more adaptable species, a species we scorned as chaotic and primitive, has shown us the truth. The truth is that we are not safe. The truth is that a great darkness is coming, a shadow that has consumed empires far greater than our own." He turned his gaze to Arbiter Kalen, whose face was a study in conflicted agony. His entire worldview, his faith in the Glipt way, had been systematically dismantled. "Arbiter," Thrax said, his voice softening slightly, "you spoke of the desecration of the Cathar. You were right, in a way. It is no longer a Glipt vessel, but it is not a human vessel either. It has become something more. It has become a bridge between our two species, and between our present and a future we must now fight to secure." Kalen's platform drifted forward. He looked from Thrax to the humans, his eyes lingering on the impossible waveform still rotating in the chamber's center. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of a civilization's future. "Generations," Kalen began, his voice strained, "we have been taught that the path to enlightenment is the elimination of all imperfection. We have built our society on this one singular principle. To accept that this principle is incomplete is to question the very foundation of our existence." He paused, taking a slow, shuddering breath. "But the evidence is undeniable. The logic is inescapable. Our perfection created a void in our understanding, and it is a void these humans have filled. Not with perfection, but with potential." He turned his head slowly, formally, to face Evelyn Reed. "I owe you and your species an apology. My fear was born of ignorance. I see that now." Reed simply inclined her head, a gesture of quiet acceptance that carried more weight than any words. It was not a moment of triumph, but of somber, shared understanding. In the cycles that followed, a transformation began. The Glipt Dominion, a monolithic and slow-moving institution, began to change with a speed it had not known since its inception. A joint scientific and military council was formed, the Alliance of Cosmic Sentinel, co-chaired by Thrax and Reed. The Vigilance and its fleet did not return to the Dominion's capital. Instead, it became the heart of a new, combined fleet, headquartered in the Sol system, a place that had overnight become the most strategic location in the galaxy. Glipt engineers, with their profound understanding of materials and energy, began working alongside human scientists, with their intuitive, adaptive approach to problem-solving. They did not try to fix the Odyssey's core. Instead, they began to build more. A new class of vessel was designed, the Sentinel class, built around a resonance core that was deliberately, carefully flawed, its chaotic music guided and amplified by human-designed harmonic resonators. The cold, elegant perfection of Glipt design was merged with the rugged, functional pragmatism of human engineering. The new ships were not as beautiful as their predecessors, but they were infinitely more alive. Thrax spent much of his time on the bridge of the Odyssey, which had become the Alliance's flagship. He found he preferred its chaotic, functional bridge to the sterile silence of his own vessel. He learned from the humans the value of redundancy, of improvisation, of having a manual override for every automated system. He watched them argue, debate, and collaborate with a passionate, chaotic energy that was both baffling and exhilarating. They were not a monolith. They were a chorus of disparate, often conflicting voices, and yet they somehow managed to produce a symphony. One cycle, as he stood with Ambassador Reed, watching the first of the new Sentinel-class vessels undergo its maiden spatial fold trial, he felt a sense of hope he had not thought possible. The ship vanished and reappeared in a flash of fractal light, its dissonant harmonized drive singing its impossible song across space-time. "It is remarkable," Thrax mused, his gaze on the new ship. "Our entire culture is based on achieving a final, perfect state. Your culture seems to be based on the idea of a permanent, unending state of becoming. You never seem to be satisfied with what is. You are always reaching for what could be." "It's a restless way to live," Reed admitted, her eyes on the same ship. "But it keeps us moving. The day we believe we've achieved perfection is the day we stop growing, and maybe in this universe to stop growing is to die." As the Alliance grew in strength, the Odyssey's primary mission continued, to listen. With the combined power of glipped sensor technology, they began to map the ancient signal in detail, tracing its faint, ghostly echoes through the cosmos. Dr. Thorne and Loremaster Vela led a joint team that worked tirelessly to decipher the deeper layers of the message. They discovered that it was not just a warning. It was a library, a repository of knowledge from the countless civilizations that had fallen. It contained fragments of their science, their art, their philosophy, a final, defiant testament to their existence, a desperate prayer that their wisdom would not be lost forever. It was Vela who made the final, most chilling discovery. Buried deep within the most ancient layers of the signal, older than all the others, was a different kind of message. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a library. It was a single, repeating data packet, a beacon of pure, terrifying clarity. Thrax and Reed were summoned to the primary science lab aboard the Odyssey. Vela and Thorne stood before a massive holographic display, their faces pale. The familiar, complex waveform of the warning signal had been stripped away, leaving only this one core message. "We believe this is the source," Vela said, her voice trembling. "The original signal, the one that all the others are echoes of." "What is it?" Reed asked. Thorne brought the signal into focus. It was not a message from a dying civilization. Its structure was too clean, too purposeful. It was a lock, and they had just found the key. As he inputted a final decryption sequence derived from the combined knowledge of human and glipped mathematics, the signal changed. It resolved into a clear, unambiguous star chart. It pinpointed a location. Not in their galaxy, but in the void between galaxies, a place of profound and utter emptiness. And with the chart came one final, simple message, translated from a mathematical language, so ancient it was like reading the universe's source code. "It's not a warning about a natural law or a mindless force," Thorne said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's not a harvester, it's a prison." Thrax stared at the coordinates, at the empty patch of intergalactic space that was suddenly the most terrifying place he had ever conceived of. "And the signal," Reed finished, her eyes wide with a new, more profound horror and a dawning, incredible awe. "The one that warns of the silent hunger, it isn't a warning to stay away." Vela looked at them, the loremaster of a civilization that had believed it knew everything, now standing at the precipice of a truth that would redefine existence itself. "It is a plea," she said. "A plea from the jailers. They are asking for help. The prison is failing." Silence fell upon the room, a silence deeper and more vast than the void between galaxies. The threat was not some mindless, cyclical force of nature. It was a prisoner of unimaginable power, caged for eons by a coalition of ancient, long-vanished races. And humanity, by embracing a flaw, by listening to the music of chaos, had just picked up the warden's desperate, fading cry. Their journey, the Great Odyssey, was not just beginning. It was about to lead them into a darkness far older and more profound than the stars themselves, to fight a battle for a universe they had only just begun to understand. The discarded ship had not just saved them. It had conscripted them into a war that had been raging since the dawn of time.